Hello and welcome to our EF Gap Year Alumni Intern Tell All. Tonight, we are joined by two amazing alumni, AnnaLise and Jared, who we will have the opportunity to introduce and do a nice Q&A with them towards the middle of this presentation. But for everyone who is joining here, just want to introduce myself as well. My name is John, and I am a Gap Year consultant here at EF Gap Year, and I'm also an alumni as well. So we have a three-pronged alumni approach coming at us here tonight. Like I said, this will be a Q&A style, so definitely encourage you all to utilize the chat to ask Jared and Annalise any questions. I will also be filtering them questions as well. Before we dive deeper into that discussion with Jared and Annalise, just want to give you all context as to who we are here at EF, why we do what we do with these gap year programs. So we'll run through a few slides in the beginning and then diving into the Q&A portion towards the end. So to begin today, I want to tell you a bit about EF and who we are. The first question I always get, what does EF stand for? EF stands for Education First. And we are the world leader in educational travel. We've been doing this for about 60 years. And in that time, we've helped millions of people see new places, experience new cultures around the world, learn new languages, and just discover new things about the world and about themselves. You're probably familiar with us through our EF educational tours. It's the largest provider of its kind. So maybe you have taken a spring break trip with your high school. More than likely that was with EF, or maybe you've taken that 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C., which probably was EF as well. But there are many ways that you could have interacted or encountered us in the past. EF is actually a sprawling global organization. It's made up of 17 different divisions, including EF Gap Year. And we actually have more than 50,000 staff members in over 600 offices in 114 countries all around the world. And they're all bound by that central mission of just opening the world through educational travel. So when it comes to EF Gap Year, specifically, I want to talk a bit about how this program fits into that global mission, and what it is that EF Gap Year actually delivers to the specific unit of students who are interested. So I want to start a bit with who our GAP students tend to be. As you all are familiar with already, maybe because you are the parent of a student at this stage, or maybe you yourself are a student at this current stage, but it represents a real inflection point. And when I say that, at 18 years old, most students in America have been on what probably feels like this educational conveyor belt for the past 10 to 15 years that hasn't really slowed down. And at that inflection point, they are then staring down whatever that next phase is, whether it's college or university or work, along with the cost and pressure and expectations to really make the next few years count. And for a lot of students, these stakes are high, and understandably so. And we see many of the students who are on our programs who are in need of that pause to maybe reflect on where they've been, where they currently are, and where they want to go in the future. And I want you to also know that it's maybe not because they have slipped off that educational conveyor belt, but they are coming with a high level of self-awareness and intention, understanding the power and value that using this space in this current time of their lives a little bit differently than some of their peers might do as well. And so this is where programs like ours at EF Gap Year really lives, at that intersection of those growth-minded students, but also the world of challenges and opportunities that they face, and why and how we create the programs that we create, helping students build that confidence, finding that path, and just preparing them to thrive in today's ever-changing world. And through immersing themselves in these new cultures and forging these new experiences, we really see them returning home, ready to take on whatever may be next. So with all that context in mind, I want to actually get into the specific programming here at EF Gap Year and talk a bit about how they have been constructed and deliver on that real world learning that we strive. So I'll start with the two different program options. We have our semester programs. We also have the full EF Gap Year program. The semester programs run very similarly to the schedules of an academic calendar, with departures during the fall semester in August, and departures also the spring semester in February. So as we will discuss a bunch of different offerings, again, they are great for students who are potentially looking to defer a semester or two from college, students maybe after their first or second year of college or university where they want to reassess the college they're at or the major that they want to study. And also we see students do this after they graduate college as well and before grad school or before they enter the workforce. And now with our full EF gap year program, again, it mimics the academic calendar. We have our upcoming departure date being this fall in September, and enrollment is pretty much closed on that. But we are also already working for enrollment for the fall of 2025 and also the fall of 2026 as well. And we'll get into the specifics on how that works in just a bit. But before I get into that, I want to also describe all the pieces that are included, regardless of whatever EF GAP program you are looking into. So you can see here all the different pieces, but I really want to zoom in on the last, on the support and the mentorship. And I say that because from this moment right now, all the way through to when you're actually out on the road, you're going to have a whole team of amazing people around you at all times. So first, of course, you'll have your immediate cohort of students you're traveling with. These are all groups of around 20 to 25 other students. You also have your tour directors and local guides embedded within that group, along with your student life coordinator as well, which is similar to the role an RA plays in a college dorm. And lastly, you also have your EF Gap Year Program Advisor, which is essentially like a one-on-one mentor or student support specialist available for you all during your program, but also the pre-departure phase as well. So when it comes to the actual semester programs, these are, I'm going to show you 3 programs that are all 10 weeks long that have departures, again, built around the academic semester in September and February. These specific programs all have the opportunity to earn college credit. These 3 in particular, the credit that would be offered is through an online asynchronous format. And they're all really built around having a guided exploration through culturally immersive formatting. So with the changemaker in the top left, this program specifically is about traversing across the ecosystems of Latin America. You can see Costa Rica, the DR, Peru, and then Ecuador, really working with local communities to put sustainability in action. Then we move on to the bottom where we have the Voyager program, which is more about embracing your adventurous side as you're exploring the natural beauties and wonders of Australia, and then also discovering the rich cultures of Thailand and Japan as well. And then on the right, we have the Pathfinder program, which really pulls together the themes of environmental science, history, business, culture, all while visiting about a half dozen countries across Western Europe. And again, these are a great variety of semesters to choose from, but it all really boils down to what fits your own personal goals and travel style. I also want to speak about our first semester abroad programs. And these are really unique and exciting programs that maybe are analogous to a more traditional study abroad experience, however, done in our own unique and exciting way. So you can see 2 programs that we have here. These are 2 programs specifically that we have built with professors and faculty, where we have hand designed a specific curriculum that is meant to reflect each of these exciting itineraries that we travel to. For the Mosaic of Spain on the left, it is really about experiencing that curated curriculum at the University of Granada, where you explore themes focused on Spain's history, their present, and their future as well. And the learning you do in the classroom was also brought to life a bit by also having built-in field excursions as well in a bunch of different global cities. And on the right side, you can also see another program we have in partnership with Colorado State University. Similar themes on how we built the Mosaic of Spain program. This one just travels, begins in Colorado and then goes through Costa Rica, Panama, and then Mexico. And again, these are transferable college credits that you can bring into your next college experience. And lastly, I want to show you the full EF Gap Year program that allows you to experience a little bit of each one of the components that I have described. So the EF gap year is divided into 2 semesters with departures every fall. So the beginning semester is semester 1 in the fall, where the first 6 weeks are spent across Europe, actually 1 week in a new country for each of the 6 weeks. So 6 countries, 6 weeks. Immediately after those 6 weeks in Europe, we then send all of our students to Australia to again experience a lot of intentional themes during that specific amount of time. It's 3 weeks in Australia. And then after the 3 weeks in Australia, the students wrap up with 3 weeks in Thailand as well. So this is just the first semester. It is meant to be pretty dynamic and give the students or allow them to engage with a wide variety of specific themes that really foster that global awareness. Now, for semester 2, this takes place in February, so this is after about a month and a half, 2 month winter break. And so now that you've taken kind of all the pieces that you learned in semester 1 and gotten to travel and experience life on your own across the world, you then take what you learned and apply it to this location of your choosing. So you can either choose to do an international internship in Stockholm, or you can choose to do an immersive language learning experience in one of the locations in one of the cities that you can see on the right. I personally chose to do mine in Rome, and we can kind of, speak a little bit more about what that experience looked like a little bit later. Ultimately, no matter what configuration or program or destination you choose, again, these are all really built to act as a gateway for success for whatever your next step may be. And this is kind of how the finances and funding works for a lot of our programs. I will definitely defer to either tomorrow's info session, be a way to dive deeper into the actual pricing and specifics on your own situation. And then also we'll defer to our gap year consultants. You probably in conversation with one of them now, or if not, they will be reaching out to you after this to follow up as well. So with that in mind, I want to bring back Jared and AnnaLise to talk a little bit more specifically about their experience. And Jared, maybe we'll start with you. Could you just tell the people here a quick little bio on who you are, where you're from, and the program that you chose?
Yeah, great. So I grew up outside of New York City in Westchester originally. Um, that's where I went to high school and everything like that. And then I actually decided to take a gap year pretty early on. I was actually a junior in high school when I like first decided and even applied. That was all before I finished junior year. Um, and then went through like COVID and everything actually, and still kind of was waiting through that to figure out for sure if I was going to go. And then departed on the EF Gap Year program in September of 2021, luckily enough, um, which was really great. The program looked just a little bit different, but I did do a language study in Nice, which I really loved. I did a service portion, which is very similar to the Changemaker. That was just 6 weeks in Costa Rica. And then I did an internship that was in Spain for 6 weeks. And then there was some other traveling in there that they've also now sort of mixed into different programs there, like Ecuador and Australia. All of that's sort of been mixed into different programs, which is really nice. And then since then, I've been attending Boston University. I just finished my second year there, which has been great. I'm doing an undergraduate degree in hospitality. And yeah, that's sort of what I've been doing then. And now I just actually moved into a new apartment in Boston. And yeah, it's great right now.
Great, Jared. Appreciate that. And we'll definitely dive into a bunch of those themes. Definitely have a million questions for you there. Annalise, will you kind of give us the same little synopsis of who you are, where you're from, and the program that you chose?
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, I'm Annalise. I live in the Bay Area right now, and I have for the past 10 years. I was born in LA and also lived there for 10 years. And I did the EF gap year 22 to 23. And like Jared said, it looked a little bit different, but there was a lot of overlap both with this year's gap year program and the semester programs. I did my language study in Malaga, Spain, which was one of the best times of my life. So, if anybody has any questions about language, I am so more than happy to talk about that. And I also did a lot of conservation service work in the Dominican Republic and then did an internship in Sevilla, Spain as well. And since then, I am a rising sophomore in college, and I just finished up my freshman year at Haverford College, which is a small liberal arts school in Philly. But I'm actually transferring to Brown in the fall.
Appreciate that, Annalise. And again, a bunch of themes that I want to dive in here. Also want to stop screen share just so we can all see ourselves here. Again, for everyone in the chat, please utilize it as a way to kind of ask and funnel some questions to our alumni. But Annalise, maybe I want to start with you with one of our first questions. I'd like to kind of rewind time a bit and take yourself back to the days when you were maybe in a similar type webinar, wanting to learn a little bit more about our GAP programs. Can you just bring me back to that mindset as to like what made you actually decide to take a GAP program?
For sure. So I signed up actually relatively late in the process. I think I booked in like the May before my gap year, so it was a bit like last minute. And I'm so glad I did. And I'm happy to talk more about like last minute planning as well. But I think at the time it was my senior year, and I just felt really dissatisfied with how my life was going, and I couldn't figure out why because I felt like I was kind of doing everything I was supposed to do. And I think that like dissatisfaction really came from a lack of confidence in myself because I wasn't really making many of my own decisions. And I kind of felt like I had been on this path that had been set out for me like since kindergarten, and I was just kind of doing all the things that I felt like I was supposed to and that other people expected of me. So deciding to take a gap year was something that I originally like was like, oh, let's just join a webinar, let's watch a few, we'll read through a few brochures, but we're probably not actually going to do it. And then it just really felt right. And I think it's the first major decision I made in my life. Like, to be honest, it was one of the most life-changing decisions I've made. And it was the first one that felt like it was off of that set path. So it felt really scary to be like, oh no, I'm doing something that's way different from everything else I've ever done before. But it was so rewarding and so worth it. And I think since then too, it kind of changes your mindset and makes it easier to kind of break out of like if you're on a set path and kind of stop and reevaluate what's really going to be the best for you.
Love that, Annalise. Jared, maybe same question to you, kind of rewinding time a bit and taking us back to your, I know you said junior year of high school. Take us back to the Jared in junior year of high school. What was important to you? What were you looking to get out of a GAP program? What made you ultimately decide on doing this?
Right. It's kind of funny that like Annalise and I sort of similar reasons, but like totally different or like origins in this, in the sense that I decided I was taking a gap year like almost a year and a half ahead of time, and obviously Annalise much later. Um, for me, it was more in a lot of similar ways, that sort of like being on the same track, coming from a small town in Westchester where everyone in high school is kind of a competitive environment in a way, and everyone is sort of again on this same set path to sort of go to college. And again, it's just all sort of structured and like set up. And again, very similar to Annalise, taking a gap year was something that was like felt like a great way to sort of make this big decision for myself, that like realizing that you never really get to make your own kind of decision like this when you're still in high school. To go down this path that is different, but at the same time, a path that you're not necessarily building yourself, right? Which is always good to see, that it's like you're doing it and you're finding your own journey, but you're not alone in this journey, which I think is really important. Um, but yeah, in that sense, sort of struggling in high school, just with how much pressure there is, and yeah, definitely wanting to travel. I'd done a few similar things before with team tours and stuff like that, which is just similar in the kind of travel that you're doing with these groups of students of similar ages. But it was definitely a big transition, like for me at one point saying like, oh my gosh, I would never take a gap year. And then every time you kind of talk about it and think about it, it was like inching closer to like, what, this isn't so crazy, and like I should look into this. So that's kind of how it went for me.
For sure. I love kind of that deep dive. I also know, when I was coming into this, I was probably in the middle of both of you in terms of like not too early, not too late. Just I think there's also no wrong time to start the gap year conversation as well. Kind of wherever it meets one of us. But I also know when I was kind of in everyone in this audience in their shoes, were specific things that I wanted personally to get out of my gap. Personally, I wanted that language immersion experience that was offered in Rome. Curious to hear feedback from both of you. Maybe Jared, we'll start with you and then kick it to Annalise in terms of like the specifics as to why you chose EF Gap Year. Anything specific about the program or any specific goals that you set out for yourself that you want to accomplish?
Yeah, so what originally attracted me to EF Gap Year specifically was like the opportunities it offered specifically compared to other programs, like having the option to do that language study in Nice, having like taken French in high school and always wanted to, spend time in the south of France. So having the option to do that, but also offering like that time to have all of that travel separately, right? Where you're like with all of these amazing people, just sort of going to so many different places. Um, that was kind of what attracted me, was like the dual aspects of that. Again, the program looked a little different, but that was like that to me, that was like the big draw to the EF program specifically. Um, like obviously there's the whole travel, like wanting to travel and to see the world and like take this break before college, but that was what was good about with EF.
Great. Yeah. I also know, like specifically as well, having kind of that intention as to what you want to get out of the gap year is also important as you are, researching and exploring. Annalise, anything you would add in terms of the specifics as to why EF gap year, any goals that you would set out that this program met you at?
Yeah, I feel super similarly to Jared. I mean, the way that I found EF was literally Googling like gap year programs. And I remember making a whole pros and cons list. And I went through it with my mom, and just EF had like a lot more pros than the other programs that I was thinking about. Um, but I think it was a combination of, I mean, I really wanted to develop more confidence in myself and my ability to, trust my decisions, to trust myself. And I think that something that EF does that the other programs don't do is not just exposing you to a bunch of different opportunities, like different places to travel, and like you can do an internship, you could do language study, which was part of it. I think it was also the way that EF kind of navigated that kind of forces you to have a structure and like a plan there that's like a little safety net, but at the same time, it is pushing you a little bit out of your comfort zone, and it's pushing you to learn a little bit more about yourself and pushing you to like really grow. And I think EF really put an emphasis on like that growth and like that reflection. And I think at each like module, I came out of it with like different specific skills, like learning to navigate like a city by yourself and using the local public transportation, or learning about, how to like work on coral restoration projects. Um, but I think like all of them kind of developed this, like it really like challenged me in a bunch of different ways, but it all like felt similar in that I felt way more confident in myself and how to navigate new scenarios without it feeling too scary at the same time.
I love the way you said that right there. And I think that kind of explains a lot about the structure of having both like a structured kind of itinerary, but enough independence to explore on your own, kind of similar themes there. And I resonate with a lot of what you're saying. I kind of want to maybe move a little bit forward in time. And Annalise, we can start with you here in terms of like your feelings actually in the first couple days leading up to the program and on the program as well. What were you feeling? What were your emotions like? Did it take some time to kind of get in the groove of everything? Explain to me about that.
Yeah, so I was a super shy kid in high school, and maybe still am a little bit shy at my core. Would not have expected to see myself on like an alumni panel. But so the first couple of days, I was really scared. I was really nervous that I wasn't gonna fit in, I wasn't gonna find friends, that this year that I was taking was like a big leap of faith and it wasn't actually gonna pan out. And at the end of the year, I'd be like, well, I just wasted a year and delayed, just going to college and nothing changed. And I'm really glad that that didn't end up being true. Um, because like within a few days, I like started to feel, I don't know if comfortable is the word, but there's like this energy I think about like the first week on a gap year program, because you're around so many other people who are different, but like have similar goals to you in terms of they all want to grow in this gap year. They're all taking a gap year for a reason. And it does take like, some initiative to take a gap year because it's not kind of what most people do coming out of high school. And I think that like that felt really life changing in like the end of the first week. Cause I mean, I did, to be honest, go into it really scared, and I was really scared and uncomfortable for like a day or two. And then like this feeling set in of like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have this amazing adventure. I'm gonna learn so much. The people around me are awesome. So it was kind of like an almost euphoric feeling after a little bit of nerves.
I love that, and I think that's also good context for people here as they're planning this as well. That it's not always the most extroverted people who are looking to do gap year programs as well. It kind of meets different students at a wide range of levels. Jared, also curious to hear your take on when you first arrive on program, and also maybe the days leading up to it, and what your emotions and feelings were like then.
Yeah, so obviously there were some nerves like days leading up, packing up, like you're about to like leave on this huge trip, and it's like you want to make sure you have everything, but you're also got to be thinking about like you're going to be lugging this bag around. So that's sort of like days leading up to it, like trying to figure this whole thing out. Um, and I think that's sort of like the normal stresses that everyone is sort of going to experience when like about to leave on a big adventure like this. Um, the story I always tell though when talking about like when I first got on program is that orientation happened in Boston and I was just coming in from Westchester, right? So there's all these group flights coming in from California, Colorado, Florida. So like all of the people are coming into Boston Airport all at once and they're all going to take like big shuttles to the hotel. So everyone's going to get there at once. But I was coming from Westchester, so I took the train to Boston and I went straight to the hotel. And, me even be like, I always was like a social person growing up, and I was like, a little shy, always kind of shy at first, but like I've always kind of put myself out there. But here I am, like walking into the hotel up to the floor where orientation's supposed to be, and I'm the very first person to be there. Like this big empty room, picture like you're waiting for 100 people, literally 100 people to show up. Like can't go up to your hotel room, it's not ready, it's that early. Like you're just sitting there waiting for the very first person to come in to talk to. Like look, we're both doing this crazy trip. Like, what should we talk about? Like, and so definitely insane nerves, like in that like kind of few hours actually of like sitting there and like talking to the staff of like sort of what I'm doing and the plan. Um, Eventually, like yeah, the buses started to show up, and it was definitely very easy to kind of start talking with these people, either like playing card, just talking about where we're all from and like where we're going to be doing our language portions and stuff like that. Because when it comes down to it, like all like it is on the surface very scary that you're meeting all of these new people all at once. But when it comes down to it, everyone is in the exact same situation. They're here, they don't really know anybody, they're about to leave home, probably for the very first time, and they're all looking to sort of bond with these people around them and sort of figure out who their people are going to be over this next year or semester, over these next few weeks.
I love that piece also on kind of like the the friendships you make, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that, but also knowing like where people are coming from. We all went on separate gap year programs in different years, but there definitely is a similar mindset or energy that all gap year students, regardless of what program you do, when you did it, kind of tap into to do something like this. Again, I'm from New York City, met people from all over that wouldn't have had the opportunity to connect with. Found that interesting. Jared, I want to keep it on you for a second, just kind of talking about the relationships and the people that were on your program. Curious to hear like what that looked like and how it felt like, and what community felt like amongst your cohort.
Yeah. Um, I always put it like this. There is never a greater sense of community than the people you are living with and spending like 18 hours a day with. Let me tell you, you'll never get closer to someone faster. Um, Especially like if you're doing the full gap year program now and you're going to be doing like that first whole semester, just week by week, new country, like on a bus, on a plane, on a train. You're just going to be with these people, traveling, going, moving. And that is just the best way to get to know somebody. And like from experience, and I'm sure AnnaLise will agree with this, like it's going to be 1 week and you're going to feel you've known these people for your entire life just because of how much time you're spending together and like just how much you get to talking about the what you just don't like the most complete things. And the best thing is like what you're going to be learning about yourself living with and like traveling with all of these people, right? Like living in a space with like mixing with all of these perspectives and people who come from like such different cultures and backgrounds. Um, Even if they're all coming from the United States, like it's still just a huge, like obviously huge country full. Um, it's just yeah, that's just such a great experience. Like people always tell me like, oh, what was the best part? Like ask me what was the best part of your gap year? And I always say it's the people. And I'm still in touch to this day, like over 2 years later. My best friends are like people I've met on the gap year. I'm sure John, like even longer, you can definitely say the same thing. Um, yeah, so for people yeah, lifelong connections.
Appreciate that. And as the old timer of the group, definitely can speak on the kind of long lasting friendships that live long after the program itself ends. And met up with students on my own cohort like 2 weeks ago. And also there are like opportunities to connect with alumni, whether it's alumni networking events, reunions, whatever that EF offers. AnnaLise, curious to hear kind of your answer on that as well in terms of the relationships that you've amassed on program and what community felt like within your cohort.
100% agree with Jared here. I mean, it was crazy after like 1 or 2 weeks. I'd be like, how have I not known these people for the past 5 years at least? You really do bond so fast. And I think one of the things that surprised me is like how strongly those bonds last. I'm still in touch with a ton of people from my gap year, and I count like a lot of them among like my closest friends to this day. Um, and we text, we call, we make plans to meet up with each other whenever we're like remotely in the same location. And those bonds really stay strong. I mean, it's so cliche to say, but every time I see my gap year friends that I haven't seen in forever, even if a whole year has gone by, it's like no time passes. And it's like an amazing feeling. And it is kind of nice to know like you have friends spread all over the country, spread all over the world. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's interesting having, being connected within such a unique experience that probably 99.99% of the population wouldn't have the opportunity to experience. It definitely does bond you in a way that's kind of unlike, any other group dynamic like that. Um, Also curious to hear, maybe towards middle end of the program, and at least maybe we'll start with you. I know for me personally, I had bouts of homesickness that just naturally crept in, and just different things that you comparing friends who had just gone straight off to college and instances like that. Did you deal with any of those similar emotions? I mean, did it take a while to for you to find your groove within that program, or for things to feel like it clicked a bit?
I think for me, it was a little bit less homesickness and a little bit more. There are moments in any year, and especially moments in a gap year where you're really challenging yourself, where like those challenges can get, a little tiring, a little fatiguing. And I think in those moments, it's easy to like compare like the quintessential college moments back home and be like, oh, I could be here, I could be in one place. And I think it's really important to remember that if you want the traditional college experience, you can really have it like right after your gap year. And taking a gap year in my experience, didn't diminish my first year of college at all. I felt like I really did get like the nice traditional college experience, and I had like all those quintessential moments. I just had them a year later, and I think I enjoyed them a lot more because I knew myself a lot better and I felt more confident in who I was. So I think any FOMO that I maybe had throughout the year kind of disappeared once I was actually in college and being like, oh, yeah, no, this was awesome. I get my awesome first year of college and my awesome gap year. Um, in terms of homesickness, I didn't feel it too much, but obviously it like varies from person to person. For me personally, I think just we were doing so much stuff and there was so much like exciting stuff going on that it kind of distracts you from homesickness a little bit. I think it does hit from time to time for sure. It's a totally normal, natural thing. But I think you tend to get like a little bit wrapped up in like all the awesome things that are going around you and the beautiful things that you're seeing. And there's so much cool stuff to like do and appreciate that it feels a little bit less intense than it might otherwise. I actually felt like I felt more homesickness during my first year of college than I did during my gap year, which really surprised me. But I think it's just because, there was so much going on around you. And I think it's also important to know that, like, if you're feeling homesickness, like, you will not be the only one feeling it as well. Like, I didn't feel it a ton, but I had friends who did. And like your friends are there to support you because your friends are going through the exact same thing that you are. And not always the exact same thing, but there will be people who are like around you, like feeling homesickness, who are away from home for the first time. And like Jared said, you really do bond super fast with people when you're spending like all this time together with them every day. So I think that you're always going to have like a support network wherever you go.
I love the way you worded that, and also I do think it reaches people at different times if it ever does. Also knowing that it's not 52 weeks abroad and it's 2 semesters with pretty substantial winter break in between. You have two finish lines. You both are able to cross, and also utilizing your phone in the same capacity you utilize it back home. I still FaceTime my own parents and friends and showed them photos and shared and still was connected on social media, which helped to kind of limit that for me personally. But Jared, also curious to hear your take on that in terms of like towards the middle end of the program when it felt like things like kind of clicked and when you felt your groove and any of those other
Mm-hmm.
pieces there.
Yeah, so sort of in a similar sense to Annalise, but more like to elaborate, because in a lot of similar points, like on this, like first of all, like you're doing so many things, you're moving and traveling so much, you're seeing so many things. And when your days are filled with just so much activity and so much like cultural immersion and just so much exploring and adventure, like it sounds a little cliche to say all that, but it's like when your days are filled with so much and you're enjoying it so much, you kind of like it, like Annalise is right. Like it kind of takes up that time when you would be getting homesick. For me, having done some of like those teen tours and stuff in the summers, in high school before leading up, I think it made that initial leaving of home a little bit easier on me. But again, sort of it comes at different moments, and it's really all about it comes at those moments when you get down. But like again, kind of going back to what Annalise said and kind of going back to the previous question, it's you are at the same time surrounded by all of these people who you are getting to know. And like I think the biggest thing that really is why you get to know people so fast is because you're all growing and changing and adapting together. And I think that is what really kickstarts like all of this like connectivity and whatever you would call it, connection and everything. Um, and so like in those moments when you're starting to get down and you can start to feel homesick, like yes, it's great to call your parents, and like I'm not discouraging that at all. Call your parents as much as you can. But at the same time, when you're feeling down, the best thing to do is like go outside and see what your friends are doing. Like maybe they're all hanging out, maybe they're all watching a show, maybe they're hanging on the beach somewhere. I that's like the best piece of advice I would give. Like, you can choose to like kind of get kind of blue and get down because like again, it's going to be long days sometimes, not, waking up early to travel and this and that. But again, it's all about finding comfort and support in those who are immediately around you.
And I think that also, like in terms of takeaways, and this could probably segue nicely into one of the questions that was just asked, and kind of on that chronological timeline I'm taking us all on, in terms of like how GAP prepares you for whatever is next in life. And obviously going through, a wide range of dynamic experiences. I know personally made me think of college almost as like a piece of cake. If I could travel the world and meet people from all over the country, I could definitely do, my domestic college as well. But curious, Jared, maybe we'll keep it rolling with you in terms of your kind of immediate takeaways, after you finished your
Mhm.
program and then transitioning that into the beginning of your college experience, how that impacted you at all.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I did see that question and I wanted to mention this. Um, was that like when I was leaving high school and starting my gap year program, I did have some friends that were like, that's so weird that you're taking a gap year. Because again, it was like a competitive high school, public school, but still like small and competitive, and everyone was going to college. And then it was funny. I never really felt FOMO of being at college, but then I would get these texts from my same friends that were like, why are you taking a gap year? They'd be like, oh my God, you're in Costa Rica, right? Like they were like, oh my God, I should have taken a gap year. And it was kind of reversed than that. It wasn't that I was feeling left out of the college experiences that my friends who went straight to college were kind of feeling left out, that they could be traveling the world right now. And like, doing this huge experience to find themselves and grow. And um, I I would say similar though, John, like there is this huge sense of like power and like I want to say like self-assurance that you feel coming off of this gap year, like this high. Like there definitely is like and that is so true. Like you learn all of these amazing skills that are going that it will stay with you and like that will prove to be so helpful in the future. But it is all about sort of using those skills to conquer this different, like college is a different environment. And I think I honestly think college is a much more complicated issue because there's thousands of colleges out there and they're all different. And that is really what you make of it. And so much of it can also lead down to like your freshman year roommate and like things like that. But I would definitely say that the skills that you learn from coming off this gap year, and like a big part of those skills are like the social skills and the living in close quarters skills, that are so helpful when like you do go to college and like are meeting all of these people. I wouldn't say I will like identify the question directly, like it all, again, it depends on the college. For me, like being at Boston University, it's such a big school with such an international population. It was great having this experience where like honestly I made a lot of friends who were international students, and I could sort of talk about like either if I visited a country or visited a country nearby. So I wish I had a more clear answer, but in terms of like how it, you definitely leave with really beneficial skills. The question of how you actually feel when you get to college is more dependent on the situation for sure.
I do know that Annalise's kind of points back to a point you made. After my when I was not going on my gap program in the first, couple weeks, when I saw all of my, friends, had their syllabus week, and you feel like you're missing out on that. And then to Jared's point, it's like, oh no, then you're going on this international travel experience, and you're after, the college, the exams and essays and projects start piling up. Then I feel like it makes it a little bit clearer for students. But Annalise, curious to hear your kind of transition post gap, the time afterwards, and then maybe the beginning pieces of college, how some of the gap might have influenced it. Any takeaways that you have there?
Definitely. I think it doesn't make it more difficult to fit into college. I mean, I'll be completely honest, I am like going to be transferring the fall, so obviously the college that I chose my senior year didn't end up being like the perfect fit for me, but I still feel like I had like a really solid year, even though the school wasn't like a perfect fit. I think, I made a lot of friends and like I mean, we're still friends and I still love the people that I met at that school and a lot of the experiences I had at that school. It definitely gives you like a little bit of a different perspective for sure, but I think I did have like a lot of friends at my old school who did take gap years. And then I think, it's not something that really isolates you. It's more something that just like, if you're in a group of people, you're gonna have like a fun story to tell. Um, but I mean, on a more serious note, I think I really was lacking a lot of self-esteem and confidence coming right out of high school. And I think that really changed dramatically in my gap year. And so I was really grateful that I got to start college knowing a little bit more about who I was and having already made, like certain mistakes and like figuring things out about myself. And it felt good to start college and be like, okay, so this is who I am. And this is more of like what I want out of it. And I think it really gives you like a confidence to go after what you want, which I think like initiative is so useful in the college environment, whether that's like the confidence to reach out to professors or the confidence to like go for that like research position. I remember I ended up walking on to like the varsity fencing team at my school with like zero experience in fencing, which was a crazy story. And I can't believe that I ended up at the time, I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, I'm committing to this sport I've never done before. Why am I doing this? And I just trusted my gut. I was like, this is not going to be a waste of time. It's going to be fun. I'll figure it out. And it ended up being like my favorite experience of the year. And I made like some of my closest friends from that year on that team. And it was, I mean, it was humbling because I lost a lot naturally, but you grow, you improve. And it was a ton of fun. And I think just stuff like that is stuff that people who take gap years are a little bit more likely to do because I would have never done that coming straight out of high school. I think if you're like, okay, I lived in like this city where I didn't fluently speak the language for like 6 weeks and like I still made great friends and had a good time and navigated and it was fine. Like I can do this, like, and I think that mindset is so great to have going into college. And I think it does help you find friends because you kind of know what you're looking for, you know yourself a little better, and you have like a confidence that I think kind of draws people.
For sure. Jared, were you going to add something on that note?
Yeah, just because that like what Annalise just said, it kind of like touches on this question that just came up in the chat. Like everything that happens on your gap year, like for sure is just such a beneficial experience. So, oh my gosh, I don't know if everyone just heard that. There's a big thunderstorm in Boston right now. But anyways, um, when applying to colleges and things like that, I mean, I did apply to college before going on my gap year and then deferred. But 100% having this not only like international global experience, like gaining this global citizenship, but just like getting to know yourself better, gaining these skills and confidence, like exactly what AnnaLise said in initiative, like not only is going to be better when you're applying to colleges just on your resume alone, also just the way you write all of your essays are going to be different. But besides that, when applying to jobs is just huge. Jobs love, like I do work while I'm in school, but even after that, even it doesn't like even after college, employers are gonna love that you have this international experience and perspective. It's immediately gonna set you apart than all of these people that went to college and did not have this experience, like exactly what AnnaLise said. And then it's also gonna give you the confidence, like on so many levels, having this experience is so beneficial to have for your future. It really gives you so much just perspective. It gives you something interesting. You are going to learn so much about just sort of how the world works and just you're going to get so much cultural knowledge. And that's going to really just set you apart from everybody else.
We actually had a conversation not too long ago with on a similar kind of a webinar style like this with the director of admissions at Duke University. And Duke is actually a big proponent for gap years to actually give students scholarships if they hear that they are taking a gap year, specifically for for funding their own gap year movement as well. Because Duke also sees the return on investment gap year students have when they're on campus. To Annalise's point, the more engaged in campus activities, more engaged with the professors and curriculum, which definitely stands out and reflects the Duke brand better, post college. And also, Jared, to your point, obviously employers are looking for the individuals that stand out and have something that they can speak about or a unique perspective. So all those pieces definitely resonate with both of you. I'm curious to hear, maybe AnnaLise, we'll start with you and throw it back to Jared in terms of if your gap specifically influenced any of your specific interests, maybe if that's within college or maybe personally as well with a major or any personal interests.
Yeah, so before my gap year, I kind of ran a teensy tiny bit, like sporadically, never really consistently, and always on a treadmill. For whatever reason, I could not get myself off the treadmill. Going outside was just beyond my capabilities. But then during my gap year, like, you never want to go on a treadmill, I think, in your gap year because there's always so much cool stuff going around outside. You want to be spending as much time outside enjoying it as possible. So it kind of did motivate me a little bit more to like run outside. And I had friends who would be like, "Oh, let's go for a run." And so I actually got like a little bit of experience running outside, which sounds strange to me now. Like, why wouldn't you? But my mind was just stuck on the treadmill. And I loved it. I was like, "Oh, this is so cool," because not only am I like getting this exercise, but I get to see everywhere around me. I get to explore. I get to cover more ground faster, which is always cool in a new city. And I really did take that back with me when I came home. I actually trained for my first marathon the summer right after my gap year. I'm currently training for another one. I did an ultra this past winter. So this will be, I guess, my fourth marathon coming up. And I just like have fallen in love with running in a way that I did not in high school. And I think a lot of that was both like falling in love with the actual process of doing it and like going outside and exploring places that you wouldn't see otherwise. I feel like I took that back with me even in California. You think you know your hometown super well, and then you run like further and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like 5, 10 miles away, and I had no idea this like looks like this. But also just I think there's like a confidence in myself that I didn't have earlier. So when I was like, I think before I like a marathon was always sort of one of those things that was on my bucket list, but I never really actually thought I'd do it. And then that summer I was like, no, you know what? I could do this. Like if I want to do it, I can do it. And I did it. And I think just stuff like that, I think that your gap year kind of like enables you to like believe in yourself a little bit.
I love that. And I think that's so cool that you kind of took that from your gap year and it motivated you in a real tangible external sense. Jared, curious to hear kind of anything related to how your gap year might have influenced your own maybe collegiate interests, but maybe personal interests as well.
Yeah, so a little bit of a different answer for me. It was more about because because like I had always known like going into like restaurants and hotels was like what I was gonna do. But on a less tangible level, having this like cultural knowledge and like global knowledge is just so beneficial when you are meeting new people. Like I think that's definitely the biggest advantage like that I have coming off of my gap year. Again, kind of being a social person and like having sort of I did have like sort of goals set. Again, I was like coming to BU already um to do hospitality specifically. But again, it is all about just like those additional skills and perspectives that you gain. Like that's sort of really become a part of my whole like just what I really value, in myself and in other people is sort of like their perspective. And whenever I look at, whenever I'm trying to solve something or wherever I have a dilemma or if I'm in an argument, I'm all like, maybe I should step back and like think about the other person's perspective, or maybe I need to acknowledge something or think about this like a different angle that I'm not thinking about because somebody else is going to come to the table with a different opinion about it, right? Like that's how it is. And that is definitely like has been so helpful and has definitely stuck with me. For now 2+ years, almost 3 years after my gap year. It's definitely just sort of how to approach different difficult situations. Yeah.
Appreciate that, Jared. Also, I see a question in the chat that I just wanted to address in terms of the Stockholm internship selection. If it's a business internship or the type of work you're participating in, to give some context on the internship, it's actually intentionally kind of vague, only because we try to curate it as much as possible to the students' own interests and motivations. So before even going on to the internship portion of the program, we would have a one-on-one conversation with each one of our students, unpacking their goals, their interests, and motivations to align them with an organization that can best help them accomplish those goals. So that's the piece on the internship. Obviously, to get into more nuances or more specifics, I defer to a gap year consultant, or also maybe tomorrow's info session as a way to get deeper into that. But I also know we are running a little bit close to time here, so kind of want to end it off with one final question to both you, Jared, and AnnaLise, and something kind of simple. But Jared, maybe we'll start with you, and at least you can wrap it up. What are some tips or advice you would have everyone at this stage in this webinar that you just want them to know?
Yeah. So the tip that I have given to people, like having done a few of these webinars now, is like this experience, whether you semester gap year, whatever it is 100% what you make of it. And whether like again, like I kind of mentioned it earlier, like when you're getting down, like you have options of what you can do. So when you're out there, like how like you only get out of it what you're going to put into it, right? So when I was traveling, there was a lot of times where it's like, okay, well, we're going to go plant mangroves now. And like, if you don't make the bus, you don't make the bus. Like, you're not going to be in trouble, but you will now spend the day, it's like stuck at the hotel, right? Everybody else in the group is going to be doing this activity and bonding and doing this. So it's like, there's going to be moments like that where it's like, go for it. Anything you should do, you should go for it, because the more you do, like the more you're going to get out of it. Expect the unexpected, and expect to meet, like, just to form the strongest bonds of your life. Like going through it with these people, like that's going to be the best thing ever just in the world. Like you'll realize it. Sounds crazy or cliche and like kind of like, I don't know what this guy's saying. Like, I don't know if I should believe him, but full on, trust me, like this is just totally life-changing experience.
Appreciate that, Jared. And also, I do believe that there is truth in cliche, or in how that feels. Annalise, kind of want to end it with you to wrap up in terms of any last tips or advice you'd give to the students and parents who are contemplating taking a gap year.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Jared said is so true. And just kind of adding on to that a bit, don't like box yourself in. If something seems like something that like the old you wouldn't do, or something that feels like a little bit too much of a challenge, check in with yourself. But I think a lot of the times, like, you can kind of push yourself to do more than you think you're capable of. And the more that you do that, I think the easier it becomes. So, I mean, I think that applies to taking a gap year in the first place, but I think also that applies to once you're on the gap year, you're going to have so many amazing, like, life-changing opportunities. And like the more that you take, the more memories you're going to have, the more stories you're going to have, the more friends you're going to have at the end of the year.
There it is. Thank you, Annalise. Love that. Definitely, I know we're going to use this, snippets of these recordings is something to live long after this webinar for future families and folks who couldn't make it. So with that said, Jared, AnnaLise, thank you so tremendously much for your wisdom and insight here on these GAP programs. And also thank you for everyone in the audience here also spending their Wednesday evening with us talking gap years. Definitely grateful for all of you. And with that said, if you want to hear more about Jared, AnnaLise, want to connect with them directly, message your gap year consultant as a way to kind of maybe set up a even one-on-one conversation with either one of them to learn a little bit more about their specific experiences. But with that said, I will bid you all do good night, and we will talk to you very soon. Thanks, guys.